Hi, I'm Aurel Enriquez, and this video contains our discussion on Chapter 2 of Mahon's Diagnostic Microbiology, which focuses on host-parasite interaction. Here is the outline of our discussion. Now, after this chapter, we should be able to define some terminology such as parasitism, indigenous biota, true pathogen, opportunistic pathogen, and zoonosis. We should be able to also explain the following factors that determine the composition of the normal flora of various body sites. Next, we would also be able to evaluate the role of indigenous microbiota in the pathogenesis of infectious diseases. After that, we would also be able to describe the characteristics of infectious agents that enable them to cause disease in the host. And lastly, we would be able to discuss the sequence of phagocytosis and killing of an infectious agent. One of the terms that we need to be familiar with is colonization. Colonization simply means the growth of microbiota on or in a specific body site without causing damage or producing any symptoms. Pretty much what a commensal organism usually does. We'll talk more about that later. Next is symbiosis. So symbiosis is defined as the association of two organisms that are living together. So the organisms in this scenario are called symbionts. Okay. Now symbiosis, this is a general term that refers to a close and prolonged association between two organisms of different types. So when we say symbiosis, hindi pa po natin ini-specify dito whether the organisms are benefiting, causing harm, or all those other stuff. Okay? But when we say mutualism, ito po, meron ng clear definition kung anong napapala ng bawat organisms that are involved. So in mutualism, both the host and the bacteria would benefit from one another. So let's take, for example, a real life scenario. No? So kapag sinabi mo sa seatmate mo na, pahiram naman ako ng highlighter, tapos pinahiram ka niya, pero sinabi niya, okay lang, pero pahiram ako ng ballpen, that's kind of like an example of mutualism, di ba? Because you both got something useful from each other. Okay? So an example of mutualism in the human body is the presence of lactobacilli in the urogenital tract of women. So the lactobacilli can provide host protection by preventing the colonization of pathogenic species at the urogenital tract where they derive nutrients from the host. Okay, so ulitin po natin, pag sinabing mutualism, both the host and the organism are benefiting from one another. Ulitin ko, yung binigay po na example is the lactobacillus species that is present sa urogenital tract of women. Okay? So yung lactobacillus po, nakakakuha siya ng nutrients dun sa environment ng urogenital tract. But at the same time, it's capable of providing some form of protection against other pathogenic bacteria. All right? So again, that's an example of mutualism in the human body. In commensalism, the microorganism benefits from the host, but it brings no beneficial nor harmful effects to the host. So, gamitin po ulit natin yung scenario na ginawa kong example kanina with your seatmate. No? So, kapag sinabi mo sa seatmate mo na pahiram naman ako ng ballpen, tapos pinahiram ka niya ng walang hinihingi in return, no? Tapos hindi naman siya naiistorbo, that's an example of commensalism. Okay, so again, in commensalism, the organism has or gains something, no? It benefits from the host, but it doesn't cause any harm or inconvenience or wala rin naman itong benefit dun. So basically, hindi apektado yung host kahit nagbe-benefit yung organism. Okay, so that's commensalism. An example of commensalism in the gastrointestinal tract of humans is the presence of Klebsiella pneumoniae and Proteus mirabilis. So let's focus on Proteus mirabilis. No? This is considered as a commensal of the gastrointestinal tract because it's living in our GIT rent-free. Okay? But it's not causing any disease as long as it stays within the gastrointestinal tract. All right. So this photo on the left is a culture of Proteus mirabilis showing its characteristic swarming motility. So again, ang Proteus mirabilis po no is an example of a commensal in the gastrointestinal tract of humans. Nabubuhay siya doon. It thrives in the GIT, but it does not cause any disease. Okay. Up next, no, the next concept is probably something that we're already familiar with, and that is parasitism. So parasitism is when an organism benefits from the host and it harms them at the same time. All right. So ayun nga po, nagbe-benefit na siya, may nakukuha na siyang mga magagandang bagay dun sa host, pero at the same time, nasasaktan or nabibigyan din ng sakit yung host. So the primary example for this one is Entamoeba histolytica, which is a parasite. Alright, so Entamoeba histolytica, no, it derives nutrients from the host, but it also causes intestinal ulcers. Okay, dinadamage niya po yung lining ng gastrointestinal tract ng host niya kung saan kumukuha siya ng nutrients, literally biting the hand that feeds you. Okay, so that's an example of parasitism. Now, microorganisms that are commonly found on or in body sites of healthy persons are called normal flora or indigenous microbiota or usual microbiota. So the different body sites may have the same or different microbiota depending on different conditions. So microorganisms that colonize an area for months or years are referred to as resident microbiota. Okay, ulitin po natin. Kung ang organism na ito, no, nakatira na siya dito sa specific body site na to for months or up to years, ang tawag na sa kanila ay resident microbiota. Whereas microorganisms that are present at a site temporarily are referred to as transient microbiota. Okay, ulitin natin kung temporary lang naman sila na nag-grow dun sa specific site na yun, ang tawag sa kanila ay transient flora or transient microbiota. So bakit temporary lang? What happens? No, eventually, they are eliminated by the host's immune system. Alright? So ayan po. Next are opportunistic organisms. Alright? So opportunistic organisms, usually po, no, if there is a change in the environmental conditions that can predispose an individual to an infection by the indigenous biota, a type of infection referred to as an opportunistic infection could happen. All right? So, minsan po, yung ibang mga transient flora, no, or even some of the resident microbial flora, sometimes pwede silang tawaging opportunistic organism. So, maaari po na naging immunocompromised yung pasyente or dahil kumonte yung population ng ibang normal flora within the body site of the patient, no? So, ayun po, that leads to the overgrowth of the opportunistic bacteria. Alright? Or pwede rin naman po, sometimes, ang nangyari is they have been moved from their original site or yung usual habitat nila to another body site. That's when they would also be able to cause an infection. Alright? So, ayan po, there are many different factors as to how some of our normal flora could eventually cause an opportunistic infection. But again, ulitin po natin, opportunistic organisms usually cause an infection, no? Usually originally, no, normal flora sila but nagkaroon ng changes dun sa host's immune system or dun sa current location nila. All right? So I hope you understood, no? Let's have a recap. Kapag normal flora, ang ibig sabihin, no, they're usually found in this specific body site of healthy individuals. Kapag resident microbial flora, matagal na, no, years nang nag-exist itong organism na ito sa specific body site na to. Kapag sinabi nating transient flora, no, temporary lang sila sa lugar na ito at eventually na-eliminate sila ng immune system. At kapag sinabi naman po na opportunistic organism, minsan sila yung mga normal flora na, ayun nga, no, nabigyan ng chance, nabigyan ng opportunity to cause an infection. And again, examples of those opportunities is either humina yung immune system nung patient na ito or nalipat sila sa ibang site. So kung halimbawa, normal flora ito ng gastrointestinal tract, pero bigla silang nalipat papunta sa open wound, sa skin ng pasyente, then that's an opportunity to cause an infection. Okay? Some pathogenic organisms may establish themselves in a host without manifesting symptoms. However, these hosts would now be called carriers, and these carriers are capable of transmitting the infection. Okay, ulitin po natin, may mga pathogenic organisms po na maaaring mapunta sila dito sa specific host na to, pero hindi sila magdulot ng clinical manifestations. But it doesn't mean na hindi na nakakahawa itong person na ito. So again, ang tawag na sa kanila ay carriers. Alright? So the condition of these hosts is called the carrier state. Now, the carrier state may be acute, meaning short-lived or transient lang ito, or the carrier state could also be chronic, which lasts for months, years, or even permanently. Okay? So an example of a chronic carrier state is found in post-Salmonella typhi infection. Okay? So ang Salmonella typhi po, this organism can establish itself in the bile duct and can be excreted in the stool of the patient for many years. Okay? So kahit gumaling na po yung pasyente and there are no more symptoms from the infection na lumipas, the organism may still be continuously shed in the patient's stool. Okay? So that's an example of a chronic carrier state. Here, we have two examples of organisms that could cause an acute carrier state. First is Neisseria meningitidis. This can be found in the nasopharynx of asymptomatic individuals during an outbreak of meningitis. Okay, so after a few days or weeks at most, these individuals may no longer harbor the organism. So maaaring na-eliminate na nung immune system ng pasyente yung organism. Another example is Staphylococcus aureus, all right? So it can colonize the person's anterior nares and then it is transmitted to the hands. That is carried only until the hands are washed, all right? So ulitin po natin yun, no? Minsan po, pwedeng gamiting example for acute carrier states ang Staphylococcus aureus na present dito sa external nares ng pasyente. So when a person touches their face or rubs their nose, no, for some time, nagiging carrier siya nitong Staphylococcus aureus na to. But again, it's only acute because as soon as the person disinfects their hands or washes their hands, then wala na rin po yung organism. The presence of microorganisms at a particular body site is influenced by the nutritional and environmental factors, such as the amount and types of nutrients available at that site. Okay? So, kaya po nandyan yung mga normal flora natin at these sites where they currently are is because these are the sites that meet their preferred growth conditions. Okay? So, di ba po sa chapter 1, we talked about the different types of growth conditions, kung fermenter ba sila ng carbohydrate, kung aerobic organism ba sila, do they require less amount of oxygen, microaerophile ba sila, no? So the different sites on our body provide those different growth conditions. So the normal flora that's present on or within our body, usually it's because they meet those conditions na kailangan nitong organism na to for them to grow. Okay, so for the first example that we have here is Propionibacterium acnes, which is now known as Cutibacterium acnes. All right, so usually po, yung mga lipids, yung mga fatty acids, no, that is being produced by the glands on our skin, they're usually bactericidal, all right? They're bactericidal to most bacteria, all right? Although, ang Cutibacterium po, they colonize the ducts of the hair follicles of our skin because ang Cutibacterium po, they're capable of breaking down the skin lipids to fatty acids. Okay? So, para po sa Cutibacterium, no, sa mga hair follicles, nandun yung optimal place for growth nila. Although, for some bacteria, places with high fatty acid content may be harmful. Okay, so sana po naintindihan nyo, no? Ulitin po natin, no? The fatty acids or the lipids that are being produced by the glands on our skin or yung mga substances na pinoproduce ng hair follicles natin, they're harmful to most bacteria. Pero special ang Cutibacterium acnes kasi kaya niyang i-colonize yung mga lugar na yon dahil kaya niyang i-break down yung mga lipids and fatty acids na pinoproduce nung glands nung skin natin. Alright? So this is also one of the bacterial organisms that's recognized to cause acne or pimples. Diba po? Another example is Bifidobacterium. So Bifidobacterium usually associated with human milk, diba? Because human milk has a high lactose concentration and it usually maintains a pH of 5.0 to 5.5. So this is an environment that is supportive of the growth of Bifidobacterium species. So yung mga bata po na breastfed, it is expected that they have a greater number of Bifidobacterium in their fecal microbiota compared to children who were mostly fed with formula milk. Okay? Also, as for Bacteroides and Fusobacterium, ito naman pong dalawang to, gusto kasi nila yung mga places that are only capable of supporting organisms capable of producing or performing fermentation. Okay, ulitin po natin yung statement na yun, just in case na-confuse po kayo. Bacteroides species and Fusobacterium species, they live in places that only support the growth of organisms capable of performing fermentation. Okay, meaning mas preferred nila yung anaerobic environments. Kasi 'di ba, we discussed in chapter 1 that fermentation is a process performed by some anaerobic organisms. So, these specific sites would include our gingival crevices, okay? So on the oral cavity. So the gingival crevices of humans are typically colonized with Bacteroides or Fusobacterium. Okay, so again, may iba't ibang growth conditions po na nire-require itong iba't ibang organisms na to. So kaya sila naging normal flora sa isang specific body site dahil na-meet nung specific body site na yon yung required growth conditions ng mga organisms na to. Let's now quickly go through the composition of normal flora at different body sites. So tignan lang po natin, sino ba yung mga bacteria that may be commonly recovered from the body sites that will be enumerated. The healthy human skin has many mechanisms to prevent infection and protect the underlying tissue from invasion by potential pathogens. Now, these mechanisms would include the physical separation of microorganisms from the tissue. So, literal na physical barrier lang po. Next is the presence of fatty acids that may inhibit many microorganisms. So, nabanggit na natin to kanina na napag-usapan natin. We were talking about Cutibacterium acnes. Another would be the excretion of lysozyme by sweat glands. And lastly, we also have the desquamation of the epithelium. So, yung pag-shed po ng epithelial cells natin, that's also a way of preventing infection. Kasi kung ano man yung mga bacteria na nasa surface ng skin natin, at least natatanggal sila kasama nung pag-shed ng epithelial cells natin. Alright? Kaya, ayun po, kahit medyo marami po tayong normal flora sa skin, they don't usually bother us thanks to all the above-mentioned mechanisms. Now, the normal flora of the skin depends on the activity activity of the sebaceous or sweat glands. Now, organisms concentrate the most in the areas that are moist, such as the armpit, the groin, and the perineum. Right? So sweat glands in these areas secrete substances that are metabolized by bacteria, releasing odorous amines. Alright? At yun po, yung nagiging cause ng body odor. Alright? Ulitin po natin, the overgrowth of the normal flora at specific sites of our body are also the causative agents of body odor. Okay? So, mas maraming bacteria and mas maraming byproducts of metabolism, mas matindi yung foul odor, which is why hygiene and regularly taking a bath is very important para hindi mag-overgrow yung mga normal flora natin para hindi ito magdulot ng body odor. The mouth or the oral cavity contains a large number of bacteria, with Streptococcus species being the predominant genus. Okay, karamihan daw po ng normal flora sa ating oral cavity ay galing sa Streptococcus species. Many organisms bind to the buccal mucosa and tooth surfaces. So itong mga bacteria po na nakalista dito sa box 2.2, these are also the ones that are responsible for the build-up of plaque on the teeth whenever the patient skips brushing their teeth. Okay? So ulitin po natin, the overgrowth of normal flora that's present in our oral cavity is also the causative agents of tooth decay. Okay? Kaya again, mahalaga po ang oral hygiene and regularly brushing your teeth para maiwasan ang overgrowth ng mga organisms na to at para maiwasan ang tooth decay. Let's now look into the normal flora of the respiratory tract. So the mouth or oral cavity, the nasopharynx and oropharynx, which is the upper respiratory tract, they're predominantly colonized by Viridans streptococci. So marami pa rin po na Streptococcus species ang normal flora ng upper respiratory tract natin. That would include Streptococcus mitis, Streptococcus mutans, Streptococcus aeruginosus, and Streptococcus sanguinis. Now, the rest of the upper respiratory tract is also colonized by Moraxella catarrhalis, Neisseria species, and diphtheroids. So, in the following chapters po, we'll talk more about those specific organisms. Next naman po, Haemophilus influenzae, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Neisseria meningitidis, and sometimes even Staphylococcus aureus are all potential or opportunistic pathogens that may also be found at the nasopharynx of healthy individuals. All right, so again, those are examples of the normal flora of our respiratory tract, specifically sa upper respiratory tract. Next is the gastrointestinal tract. The gastrointestinal tract is equipped with numerous defenses and effective antimicrobial factors. Now, because the intestinal pathogens are usually acquired by ingestion of organisms that are contained in contaminated food or beverages, the host defenses against these infections are present throughout the intestinal tract. Okay, hindi lang po sa stomach, kung hindi, sa lahat ng iba pang lugar tulad ng esophagus, other segments of our intestine. Okay, so despite the presence of these antimicrobial factors, the intestinal tract is thought to be colonized by over 35,000 bacterial species. Okay? But again, lahat po ng yan ay commensals. Okay? And they may also be beneficial in the prevention of the overgrowth of potential pathogens. Alright? So ulitin po natin, dito sa box 2.5, may nakalista po dito na commensal organisms within our gastrointestinal tract. So kahit may mga defense mechanisms or anti-infective na mechanisms naman po yung gastrointestinal tract natin, present pa rin po ang mga organisms na yan sa GIT natin. But then again, mahalaga sila kasi pinipigilan nila ang overgrowth ng mga pathogenic organisms. The kidneys, bladder, cervix, and fallopian tubes are normally sterile, although a few organisms originating from the perineum can also be found at the distal urethra, particularly in women. So this fact is more of an anatomical thing, Women are more likely to suffer from urinary tract infections just because the anus is anatomically very close to the urethra. Okay, so lactobacillus po, ito na-mention na natin to kanina, Lactobacillus is the most commonly known member of the normal flora of the genitourinary tract of women. And ang main reason po as to how they are able to establish themselves as an organism displaying mutualism is that lactobacilli can metabolize glycogen from vaginal epithelial cells to maintain a low pH. Alright? So, kumbaga, ito na po yung correlation dun sa na-discuss natin kanina sa kung paano na-establish ang lactobacillus species as a normal flora of the genitourinary tract of women. Ulitin natin, ang lactobacillus species po, they can metabolize or they can utilize yung glycogen from the vaginal epithelial cells. When they do that, they produce acidic byproducts. So that leads to a low pH or a mildly acidic pH in the environment kung nasaan sila, diba? Now, this acidic environment creates an environment that is inhibitory to many other organisms. Okay? Lahat ng iba pang mga bacteria, hindi po nila kayang mag-survive sa isang acidic environment, no? Pero yung lactobacilli, kaya nila, 'di ba? Yun yung preferred growth environment nila. Okay? So ayun po, no? So that is how they're capable of thriving in the genitourinary tract, but creating an environment for other organisms na hindi makapag-survive doon. Okay? So that's for the normal flora of the genitourinary tract. Let's now talk about the different routes of transmission for different microbial pathogens. The respiratory spread of infectious disease is common and is generally an efficient way to enter a host. So let's take, for example, SARS-CoV-2, di ba? Yung causative agent ng COVID-19. Very effective ang transmission nito. We don't have to do anything. We basically just have to go out without a mask in a crowded place, and that's already enough for us to acquire the infection, diba? So often, the respiratory secretions are aerosolized by coughing, sneezing, or sometimes even just talking, diba? So these very small particles are referred to as droplet nuclei and are the residue from the evaporation of fluid from larger droplets, and they are light enough to remain airborne for long periods of time. This may possibly be one of the reasons kung bakit laganap pa rin po ang tuberculosis sa Pilipinas. Okay, way before COVID-19 came to our country and became a global pandemic, no? Matagal na pong problema ng Pilipinas ang tuberculosis, and this may be because of its capability to spread through droplet nuclei. All right. So again, that's how airborne infections happen. All right. Usually, these infectious particles, they evaporate or they're present in the air and we breathe them in. All right. So that's how airborne infections are spread. Transmission of gastrointestinal infections are usually a result of ingestion of contaminated food or water. In some situations, infection occurs via the fecal-oral route. Gastrointestinal infections result from organisms that survive the harsh conditions of the stomach and competition with the microbial biota and then produce damage to the tissues of the gastrointestinal tract. So ulitin po natin yung statement na yun, no? In the previous slides, napag-usapan natin na may mga normal flora naman po talaga sa gastrointestinal tract natin, di ba? And I've also mentioned that these normal flora have the capability to prevent the overgrowth of other pathogenic organisms, di ba po? So kapag ang isang organism kaya niyang magdulot ng gastrointestinal infection, it means that it can compete with the presence of the normal flora of our gastrointestinal tract, as well as surviving the enzymes and acids that's present in our stomach, and also they're capable of destroying the cells within our gastrointestinal tract. Okay, so kaya niyang gawin yun, kaya nakapagdulot siya ng gastrointestinal infections. All right, so organisms that can cause disease by means of a preformed toxin. So pag sinabi nating preformed toxins, these are toxins that have been produced outside of the body before ma-ingest ng pasyente. That includes Clostridium botulinum, Bacillus cereus, and Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, ulitin po natin. Examples of organisms that could produce preformed toxins include Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus cereus, and Clostridium botulinum. Pag sinabi nating preformed toxins, hindi mo pa nai-ingest itong mga organisms na to, may na-produce na sila na toxins. So when you ingest these organisms, you also ingest together the toxins that they have produced beforehand. Okay? So ayun po. Other bacteria, no, that could produce toxin after the infection would include Escherichia coli, and Vibrio cholerae. Okay, ulitin natin. Ito namang dalawang to, kabaliktaran nung una nating nabanggit. So, makakain muna sila nung pasyente and then tsaka magpo-produce ng toxins ang Escherichia coli and Vibrio cholerae. Okay? So a commonly seen cause of diarrhea and intestinal infection is Escherichia coli. All right? Medyo sikat, no? Famous ang Escherichia coli. Now, this organism is a member of the intestinal biota. Okay, ulitin natin yan. Kasama po sa normal flora ng gastrointestinal tract ang Escherichia coli. Alright? However, no, here's the thing. There are some strains of E. coli that could produce cytotoxins that could cause alterations in the biochemical activity of the intestinal epithelial cells. Okay? Pasimplihin natin yung statement na yon. Sinasabi lang po dito na may mga strains ng Escherichia coli na may iba't ibang virulence factors kaya nagdudulot sila ng sakit. Alright? So they eventually lead to problems with fluid and electrolyte control by the intestinal cells. So we'll talk more about that later pagdating po natin sa discussion ng chapter 19, which focuses on the members of Enterobacterialis. All the routes of transmission of infectious diseases require some form of close contact, whether it be a respiratory pathogen or a virus that can be spread through kissing or exchange of saliva. Or pwede rin naman pong skin-to-skin transfer for diseases such as syphilis and impetigo. Or obviously, kasama rin po as close contact ang acquisition of sexually transmitted diseases such as those that are listed here. Okay, ulitin po natin, no? Examples of close contact would be, no, inhalation of particles by respiratory pathogens. All right. Next, another could be exchange of saliva. Next form of close contact is skin-to-skin transfer, and another would be sexually transmitted infections. Again, lahat po ng nabanggit ay, ayun nga po, they are transmitted by some form of close contact. Alright? So, ayan po, the photo on the left shows us a sample containing Treponema pallidum stained using the Fontana-Mason stain. So, Treponema pallidum is the causative agent of syphilis. Dito po sa listahan natin na nandito sa screen, we have impetigo, which is caused by either Staphylococcus aureus or Streptococcus pyogenes. Ito naman po, this is spread via skin-to-skin contact. The classic example of a bite wound infection is rabies. Pero ang rabies po kasi ay isang virus. So for bacterial pathogens, we have Pasteurella multocida. Pasteurella multocida may be acquired from the bite of cats and dogs, which is why if ever you've experienced, no, na kumbaga nakagat na kayo ng aso or you've been attacked by a feral cat, no, maliban sa anti-rabies shots, tetanus shots, diba? Sometimes the patient may also be prescribed antibiotics, alright? Kasi ulitin natin, may mga bacteria po na pwedeng matransmit through the bite of these animals. And again, the most well-known example is Pasteurella multocida. We also have Echinella corridens, which could cause human bite infections, alright? So, ayan po, no, Echinella corridens has been known as the causative agent of clenched fist wounds kasi usually po, no, when people fight, no, for some people who are out on the streets fighting, no, magsusuntukan sila, and sometimes other people, no, when they fight, they have the tendency to bite other people. So it has been found, no, that Echinella corridens is one of those bacteria that could cause infections, no, from human bites. Alright? So, hindi lang po tayo sa mga animals pwede makapag-acquire ng infectious pathogens, no? Kung kinagat nyo yung kapwa yung tao, maaari din po itong magdulot ng, ayan po, infection. Alright? This photo on the left is a gram stain of Pasteurella multocida, showing its characteristic bipolar staining pattern. Okay? Medyo unique ang appearance na ito for Pasteurella multocida, no? Pag sinabi nating bipolar staining pattern or safety pin appearance, mas dark yung color nung magkabilang dulo ng bacilli. Diba? Just a recap, when we say bacilli, these are elongated bacteria or rod-shaped bacteria. So dito po sinasabi na Pasteurella moltosida is a gram-negative bacilli that produces a bipolar staining pattern. And again, when we say bipolar staining pattern, mas dark yung magkabilang dulo nung bacilli, as you can see right here in this photo. So again, Pasteurella moltosida is one of those bacteria that we could acquire from cuts or bites from animals. Some infectious agents rely on the help of arthropods for them to be transmitted among hosts. So ito po, hindi natin directly na-acquire yung bacterial infection, but rather, we come in contact with their arthropod vector. So infection following a mosquito, tick, flea, or mite bite is a common occurrence in many parts of the world. So yun po, no, may mga insekto muna nakakagat doon sa pasyente bago niya ma-acquire yung bacterial infection. So again, those insects are referred to as arthropod vectors. So listed here are the examples of bacterial diseases that may be transmitted through the bite of their respective vectors. So as we go through this semester, iisa-isahin din naman po natin itong mga to, no? Anong clinical manifestations ng diseases na to at ano ang description ng vectors nila. But again, here are examples of arthropod-borne diseases. This next route of transmission is known as zoonosis, and it depends on the contact with animals or animal products. Alright, so baka po ma-confuse yung iba dyan kasi may na-mention na tayo na animal related infections kanina, diba? Through cuts or bites. Pero ito, iba po. You don't have to, or it doesn't always mean na kailangan ang isang pasyente ay makagat ng animal, no? There are other zoonotic infections out there na may iba't iba pang routes of transmission or kapag parang methods kung paano sila ma-transmit dun sa host. So, tignan po natin yung listahan na to. Zoonotic diseases may be transmitted by any of these following methods listed here. Alright? So, either contact with animals or animal products. When we say animal products, either galing dun sa karne ng animal, pwede rin namang sabihin na parang other parang waste products of the animal. Alright? So, ayan po. Animal bites, nabanggit na natin kanina. Arthropod vectors, nasabi na rin kanina. And contact with infected animal secretion. So, for example, ayun nga, urine of the animal. No? So, ayan po. Certain organisms causing disease in animals may also cause infections to humans who have contact with them. Okay? Yun po yung ibig sabihin when we say zoonotic diseases. Alright? Again, zoonotic diseases are brought about by organisms that can cause disease in animals, where they can also cause disease in humans if the humans have contact with those infected animals. Okay, I hope you understood po, no? Now, these diseases may be passed by animals through, ayun nga po, bites such as pasteurellosis. Pwede rin naman pong arthropod vectors. An example of a bacterial disease that could be acquired through arthropod vectors is yung bubonic plague. No, bubonic plague, the specific bacterial organism causing that is Yersinia pestis. Pwede rin naman pong contact with secretions such as brucellosis and contact with animal carcasses, no? Animal carcasses or the dead bodies of infected animals, and also products such as tularemia and listeriosis. So I highly suggest for this segment po is to read your book kasi medyo marami pong magkakaibang examples na nabanggit doon. Alright? But in this slide, no, we're simply listing down ano ba yung iba't iba pang mga ways on how a person could acquire an infection from an animal source. And again, when that happens, that is referred to as zoonotic infections. Next is the microbial factors contributing to pathogenesis and virulence. Pathogenicity is the ability of a microbe to produce disease in an individual. An organism may be described as a true pathogen or as an opportunistic pathogen. Okay, so nabanggit na natin yung ibang terms na to kanina, di ba? True pathogens are organisms that are recognized to cause disease in healthy, immunocompetent individuals and at a high percentage of the time. Okay, ulitin po natin kapag sinabi nating true pathogens, ito po yung mga organisms na kayang magdulot ng sakit regardless kung healthy ba or competent ba yung immune system ng pasyente na ito. Okay? So, ayun po, no? Examples of this would be Yersinia pestis. I just mentioned that in the previous slide. Yersinia pestis is the causative agent of bubonic plague. Another would be Bacillus anthracis. Okay? So, Bacillus anthracis is also a true pathogen, the causative agent of anthrax, and they are pathogenic in nearly all situations. Okay? So, when these species are recovered in clinical samples, their clinical significance is well established. Okay? Hindi sila normal flora, hindi sila laboratory contaminant. So kapag na-isolate mo tong mga organisms na to in the laboratory, it means that they're the organisms causing the infection. Okay? Dahil ulitin natin, true pathogens po sila. Alright? So there is no way that you could mistake them for normal flora. Next naman po are opportunistic pathogens. So opportunistic pathogens would include organisms such as Staphylococcus epidermidis, which in unusual conditions, they don't cause disease, but they can induce an infectious process in patients with prosthetic implants such as prosthetic heart valves. Okay? So, kumbaga, yun yung opportunity para sa Staphylococcus epidermidis. Kapag may prosthetic heart valve yung pasyente, okay, dun na nakakahanap ng avenue ang Staphylococcus epidermidis to cause an infection. You will learn more about that pagdating po natin sa discussion natin on the Streptococcus species. Staphylococcus species. Alright? Up next naman po is Haemophilus influenzae. Alright? So, Haemophilus influenzae, it colonizes the upper respiratory tract of healthy individuals without causing disease. But if given the opportunity, they can rapidly produce a life-threatening infection. Alright, so ayun po, no, ulitin natin. Examples of opportunistic pathogens include Staphylococcus epidermidis and Haemophilus influenzae. But for true pathogens, isa sa primary examples natin ang Bacillus anthracis and Yersinia pestis. Let's proceed with some terminologies po, no? Terminologies muna po tayo, alright? So as we can see right here, okay, when we say nosocomial infections, these are infections acquired within the hospital, approximately 48 hours after admission. Okay, ulitin natin, nosocomial infections are also referred to as hospital-acquired infections, specifically after 48 hours nang nasa hospital ang pasyente na to. So, regardless po kung may procedure ba or wala na nagawa dun sa pasyente, basta may na-acquire siya na infection sa pag-stay niya dun sa hospital, that's referred to as a nosocomial infection. When we say iatrogenic infection, these are infections that have resulted from any medical procedures that has been performed on the patient. Okay? So, regardless kung ilang hours nang nasa ospital yung pasyente, as long as there's already a treatment or any procedure that has been done to the patient and they develop an infection after that procedure, then that is referred to as an iatrogenic infection. So, ulitin natin, when we say nosocomial infection, it's a hospital-acquired infection that is observed after a specific number of time na nasa ospital yung pasyente. Pero kapag sinabi natin na iatrogenic infection, it's because of a medical treatment or a procedure regardless of the number of hours na nandun yung pasyente. Virulence is the relative ability of a microorganism to cause disease or the degree of pathogenicity. So it's usually measured by the number of microorganisms necessary to cause infection in the host. Generally, organisms that could establish an infection with a relatively low infective dose are considered more virulent than other organisms that would require higher numbers before they could start an infection. So ulitin po natin yun, no? Virulence is the degree of pathogenicity. Mas kaunti yung amount ng organisms na kayang magdulot na agad ng sakit, the higher their virulence. Ikumpara natin yan sa mga organisms na kailangan constant exposure muna or maraming cells muna nitong organisms na to ang ma-acquire ng pasyente bago magdulot ng sakit. They're not very virulent. No? Low lang yung virulence nila. Okay? So I hope you understood, no, that virulence is somewhat inversely proportional with the microbial load. Okay? Ulitin natin. An organism is more considered to be highly virulent if it requires only small numbers of the organism to cause an infection. All right? So ayan po. For example, no, let's say for example, Shigella species. All right? Shigella species could cause a disease with relatively low infective dose. So approximately 100 bacterial cells lang po, that's already enough to start an infection. So we could say that Shigella is considered highly virulent in comparison to other bacteria that would probably need millions or billions of bacterial cells before they could start an infection. Next is the ability of microorganisms to resist phagocytosis. So phagocytes or phagocytic cells such as macrophages or neutrophils, they play a major role in defending the host from microbial invasion. So mamaya po, sa next segment nitong discussion natin, we'll go through the 4 basic steps of phagocytosis. But ito muna po yung pag-usapan natin, no? There are many ways by which microbial species are capable of avoiding phagocytosis. And the most common mechanism for avoiding phagocytosis that is used by many different organisms is by having a polysaccharide capsule on their surface. Alright? So, di ba na-discuss na po natin to sa chapter 1. No? So, capsules are polymers. No? They're surface polymers of polysaccharides that are firmly attached to the surface of the bacterial cell. So, tinutulungan po ng capsules yung bacteria to avoid phagocytosis by masking or covering the cell surface structures that are supposed to be recognized by the phagocytic cell. Alright? So, kumbaga, no, dinidisguise niya, dinidisguise nung capsule yung antigens on the surface of the cell para hindi siya ma-recognize or hindi ma-attach yung mga phagocytes sa kanya. Okay? So, that's for the polysaccharide capsule. Recall time. Recall time muna po tayo. What do we call this, the other surface polymer that for this one, it's loosely attached naman po to the cell, but it also helps the bacteria for adherence? Do you remember from chapter 1? Which other surface structure is loosely attached onto the bacterial cell but is also composed of polysaccharides katulad ng capsules? It's the slime layer, diba? So if you would remember, there are surface structures that are both composed of polysaccharides. So una, yung capsule, which is firmly attached onto the cell. Next naman po is yung slime layer. Yung slime layer naman po, it's quite loosely attached onto the surface of the cell. Okay? Pero ayun nga po, no, both yung capsule and yung slime layer, they could help the bacteria to avoid phagocytosis. Alright? Pero yung slime layer po, aside from that, it also has the capability to adhere to surfaces. Okay? So, may isa pang kayang gawin ang mga slime layer. They could help the bacteria adhere to surfaces para nakadikit sila doon at hindi sila basta-bastang natatanggal doon sa lugar kung saan gusto sanang i-infect ng bacteria. Alright? So, ulitin natin, capsules, no, they provide protection or they help the organism avoid phagocytosis. That's capsules. But for slime layer not only helps the bacteria avoid phagocytosis, but it also aids in adherence. Okay? But again, on this slide, ang pinag-uusapan po natin ay yung polysaccharide capsules. The polysaccharide capsules help avoid or evade phagocytosis by masking cell surface antigens. Dahil ulitin natin, no, yung mga cell surface antigens, yun kasi yung tinitignan ng cells ng immune system natin para ma-recognize nila itong bacterial pathogen na ito. Okay? Another bacterial structure that protects organisms from phagocytosis is protein A. So protein A in the cell wall of Staphylococcus aureus helps the organism avoid phagocytosis by interfering with the binding of the host antibodies to the surface of the organism. Alright? So to simplify this, no, kung dapat po ang mangyayari ay yung antibody ay magbabind na dun sa antigen that is present on the surface of the cell, dahil may protein A, yung bacteria, hindi makakabind yung protein A, no? Makakabind din yung protein A dun sa kabilang side ng antibody para hindi matuloy ang phagocytosis. Alright? So, ulitin po natin, no? Instead of the antibody binding to the antigen of Staphylococcus aureus, no, protein A is preventing that from happening. So, when that mechanism is in place, no, hindi rin magbabind yung antibodies dun sa Staphylococcus aureus. So, hindi rin siya marirecognize ng immune system. So, ulitin natin, ang Staphylococcus aureus, wala siyang capsule. Okay? Wala siyang capsule na magtatago ng surface antigens niya. Anong meron siya? Protein A. Yung protein A ang pipigil dun sa mga antibodies para hindi sila dumuktong sa antigens ng Staphylococcus aureus. And the result is the same. Hindi rin matutuloy ang phagocytosis. Right? Up next, there are some organisms that evade phagocytic cell killing by releasing potent materials in tissues that could kill phagocytes. Okay, and these materials are referred to as leucocidins. Okay, so let's take again, for example, some Staphylococcus species. No, so pathogenic Staphylococci can release leucocidins that cause lysosomal discharge of white blood cells into the cytoplasm. So a staphylococcal leucocidin, which is specifically referred to as the Panton-Valentine leucocidin, is lethal to leukocytes and contributes to the invasiveness of the organism. So dito naman po, no, in summary or in simpler terms, leucocidins have the capability to kill phagocytic cells. Alright? So para maiwasan yung phagocytosis, papatayin na lang niya yung phagocytic cell. Alright? Which again is brought about by leucocidins. Specifically for Staphylococcus species, ang tawag dito ay the Panton-Valentine leucocidin. Most infectious agents need to attach to host cells before infection occurs. In virtually all other cases, the bacterium, virus, or fungi would require adherence to the host cells before infection and disease could progress. So the microbial surface structures that mediate attachment are called adhesins. Okay, ulitin po natin yon. Bago magsimula ang isang infection, yung bacteria or yung virus or yung fungi po, kailangan niya munang makapag-attach dun sa surface ng host cell na i-infect niya. So, yung material na ginagamit nila para makadikit dun sa host cell, these are referred to as adhesins. So, again, adhesins are defined as the cell surface structures that mediate attachment. Alright? They bind to the receptors on the preferred host cell. So, may mga specific structures din po sa ibabaw ng preferred host cell kung saan kayang mag-bind or mag-match nitong mga adhesins na to. So the main adhesins in bacteria are their fimbriae, pili, and surface polysaccharides, which I've mentioned earlier, no? Yung surface polysaccharides po, ang examples nito ay yung capsule tsaka yung slime layer, di ba po? So fimbriae, they enable the bacteria to adhere to host surfaces by increasing the organism's colonizing ability and providing resistance to phagocytosis. Okay? So may ambag din po pala ang fimbriae in resisting phagocytosis. Okay? Although, mas kilala kasi ang fimbriae na ang function niya is for adherence. So, once bacteria are attached to these non-phagocytic cells, no, phagocytes by white blood cells is less, or phagocytosis by white blood cells is less likely to occur. Kasi wala naman pong intensyon yung phagocytes natin to engulf our own cells. Okay? Ulitin po natin yon. Once a bacterial organism adheres to their preferred host cell, na natitigil na rin or naiiwasan na rin ang phagocytosis. Dahil ulitin natin, our phagocytic cells are not programmed to engulf yung sariling cells ng host. Okay? So, ayun po. Next, an example of this is Escherichia coli. So, sinasabi ko sa inyo, famous talaga yung E. coli. Ang daming example para sa kanya, Escherichia coli, some strains of E. coli could cause what is known as traveler's diarrhea, where they use their fimbriae to adhere to the cells of the small intestine. Ulitin natin, may fimbriae ang Escherichia coli, ginagamit niya ito para kumapit sa cells ng small intestine, where they secrete a toxin that causes the disease and its symptoms. Okay? Another example is Neisseria gonorrhoeae. So its fimbriae is important for Neisseria gonorrhoeae to infect the epithelial cells of the genitourinary tract. And isa po ito sa mga dahilan kung bakit hindi basta-basta nawawash away ng urine flow ang Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Alright? So this is because they are securely attached onto the patient's host cells thanks to the fimbriae. Some pathogens are able to survive within the phagocytic cell after they have been engulfed. Okay? For some bacterial pathogens po, hindi guaranteed na ikakamatay nila kapag na-phagocytize sila ng mga phagocytic cells natin. So these organisms have developed methods to prevent being killed intracellularly. So some organisms prevent fusion of phagosomes and lysosomes. Meanwhile, others have a resistance to the effects of lysosomal contents, and others naman po, they are able to escape from the phagosome into the cytoplasm. So, to establish itself and cause disease, a pathogen must be able to replicate after attachment to the host cells. Okay? So, sige, na-survive nga nila yung phagocytosis, but now that they are inside of the cell, the next step for them is to be able to replicate. Okay? So, several pathogens like Haemophilus influenzae, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, and Neisseria meningitidis, they produce an immunoglobulin A or IgA protease. So, the IgA protease would degrade the IgA that is found in mucosal surfaces. Other pathogens like Borrelia species, they can circumvent host antibodies by shifting key surface antigens. Okay? So the host would produce antibodies against the old antigens, which are no longer effective because the organism now has new antigens that do not bind to the antibodies that have been made against the old antigens. Okay? So sana naintindihan po, during the primary or the first exposure to the pathogen, our immune system would create antibodies against those antigens na una niyang nakita. Okay, they were first able to recognize those antigens. So, that's what happens. Ang special capability daw po ng Borrelia species is that kaya nilang i-adjust or kaya nilang palitan yung mga surface antigens nila that were first recognized by our immune system. So, kumbaga, kaya nilang magbihis, kaya nilang magpalit anyo. So, the next time na ma-encounter sila ng host na to, hindi na effective yung mga naunang antibodies na nagawa ng immune system natin. Kasi nga, iba na yung surface antigens na pinepresenta nila during the succeeding or during the second exposure. All right? So again, that's what we mean when we say shifting cell surface antigens. In most situations naman po, when an organism is engulfed by a macrophage, lysosomal contents are released into the phagocytic vacuoles and the organism is killed. However, if the engulfed organism is not exposed to intracellular killing and digestive processes, it is able to survive and multiply inside the macrophage. So let's look at these examples. Yung chlamydia, mycobacterium, brucella, and listeria species. These ones are easily engulfed by macrophages and phagocytes. Okay, ulitin po natin ang chlamydia, mycobacterium, Brucella, Listeria, they don't even try to avoid phagocytosis, di ba? Kapag na-phagocytize sila, okay lang. Kasi, no, these species are not only able to survive inside of the macrophages, but they are protected from the host other immune defenses. No, they're able to multiply intracellularly. Okay? So itong mga nabanggit na to, chlamydia, mycobacterium, brucella, listeria, no, aside from the fact that they're able to survive from the killing activities inside of the phagocytic cell, nagagamit pa po nila itong opportunity na ito para magtago doon sa loob ng phagocyte and away from the rest of our immune system. So with that, no, they proceed to multiply inside of the phagocytic cell. Most bacterial exotoxins are composed of two subunits. One is non-toxic and it's only there to bind the actual toxin to the host cells. And the other one, yung isang subunit, yun yung toxic. Okay? So the gene that is responsible for encoding toxin production is commonly encoded by bacteriophages and plasmids, which we've already discussed in chapter 1. Di ba po? Sa mechanisms of gene transfer. So exotoxins may be produced by both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and examples of these have been listed here. No? So Clostridioides difficile, Clostridium botulinum, Corynebacterium diphtheriae, and Streptococcus pyogenes and Staphylococcus aureus. Again, these are the different species of bacteria capable of producing exotoxins. At ulitin natin, usually these exotoxins are encoded by plasmids na na-introduce ng mga bacteriophage. Let's now talk about endotoxins. Endotoxins are composed of the lipopolysaccharide portion of the outer membrane on the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. So again, if you rewind to our discussion on chapter 1, diba? The structure of gram-negative cell walls is manipis lang yung peptidoglycan layer nila, but on the surface of that, they have yung LPS or yung lipopolysaccharide. So sinasabi po dito that the endotoxins, no, of these gram-negative organisms are usually incorporated on the outer membrane of their cell wall. Bale, structural yung toxin na ito. Kasama siya sa structure ng outer membrane. Alright? So, ulitin natin, yung mga gram-negative organisms lang po ang may endotoxins because this is literally a component of their lipopolysaccharide. So, yung cell wall structure po nila, yung naging dahilan as to why they have an endotoxin. And this is not something that they just produce. Okay? Now, lipopolysaccharides contain three regions. Okay, they have an antigenic O-specific oligosaccharide, they have a core polysaccharide, and an inner lipid A. Okay, so for now, no, hindi muna natin pag-uusapan yung iba, pero mag-focus tayo sa lipid A. Okay, lipid A is the portion of the lipopolysaccharide outer membrane that is responsible for the toxic activity of the endotoxin. On to the host resistance factors, ang i-discuss na lang po natin dito ay phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is an essential component in the resistance of the host to infectious agents. It is the primary mechanism in the host defense against extracellular bacteria and even numerous viruses and fungi. All right? So cells in a human body that is responsible for phagocytosis would include neutrophils, macrophages, and monocytes. Ulitin po natin, no, sa segment ng discussion na to, phagocytosis na lang ang pag-uusapan natin. Reading assignment nyo na po yung ibang mga resistance factors. But again, if we were to enumerate which cells in our body are capable of phagocytosis, that would be the neutrophils, macrophages, and monocytes. Four activities must occur for phagocytosis to take place and be effective in host defense. So one is migration of the phagocyte to the area of infection or chemotaxis. Two is attachment of the particle to the phagocyte. Three is ingestion, and four is killing. Okay, so diapedesis, this is the movement of neutrophils between endothelial cells and blood vessels. So when an infection occurs, large numbers of neutrophils would accumulate to the site. So this accumulation is not a random event. Rather, it is a directed migration of neutrophils into the area where they are needed. All right? So this migratory process is called chemotaxis. Okay? Ulitin natin, ang pagpunta ng mga neutrophils sa isang lugar kung saan sila kailangan ay tinatawag na chemotaxis. So chemotaxis happens because of chemotactic agents which would attract the phagocytic cells. Okay, ulitin po natin yon, no? Ang isang lugar kung saan may foreign pathogen or isang infection, nagre-release ito ng mga chemotactic agents which are chemical substances that have the capability to attract phagocytic cells. Alright? So these would include a number of bacterial products, no, products from damaged tissue cells, and products from responding immune cells. So yung mga nare-release daw po, no, na chemicals ng mga nasisira na bacterial cells, nasisira na host tissues, no, yun po yung nagiging chemotactic agents para ma-sense or masabihan yung mga neutrophils na okay, kailangan nating pumunta doon. Okay? So ayan po. Your next question might be, ma'am, ano po ang pinagkaiba ng diapedesis and chemotaxis, no? Is diapedesis and chemotaxis the same? They sound the same because they're both from the movement of neutrophils, di ba? Okay, so i-clarify natin yun, no? Kapag sinabi po nating diapedesis, no, this is the mere action of a neutrophil squeezing itself in between cells para makadaan siya. Okay? So it's not diapedesis if the cell doesn't have to force its way in between the cells. Okay? Ulitin po natin, no? Diapedesis is the movement of neutrophils between endothelial cells and blood vessels. Basically, yung neutrophils po, ipagsisiksikan niya yung sarili niya sa pagitan ng mga endothelial cells, sa pagitan ng mga blood vessels para makaalis siya at makapunta siya dun sa lugar kung nasaan yung infection. Okay? Pero ulitin natin, kapag sinabi nating chemotaxis, regardless kung saan dadaan yung neutrophil, whether it be between the cells or just an open body cavity, as long as they're moving towards that area because of the chemoattractants, that's when we say na ang nangyayari ay chemotaxis. Okay? So ulitin po natin, it's called diapedesis if the neutrophil has to move in between endothelial cells or blood vessels. But it's called chemotaxis if the neutrophil is moving towards the chemotactic agent, regardless kung saan siya dumaan. Alright? So I hope you understood that explanation. Okay? So next is attachment. Alright? So the neutrophil membrane has various receptors. Okay? So gawin nating example, yung immunoglobulin G, yung IgG. Ang mga neutrophils, they have receptors for two different types of IgG. And these receptors can bind to the invading microorganism, resulting in the microorganisms being coated with IgG. Okay, eventually, itong pathogen na to, matatakpan daw siya o matatabunan siya ng mga IgG na dumikit sa kanya. So, ang mangyayari po, yung mga IgG dun sa cell ng pasyente ay kakapit doon sa surface ng bacteria. Tapos, pag dumating na yung phagocyte sa kung nasaan yung bacteria, it can now attach to the bacterial cell dahil mayroon nga po siyang receptors para dun sa IgG na dumikit dun sa surface ng bacterial cell. So basically, the phagocyte would attach to the IgG that has attached onto the bacterial cell. Duktong-duktong lang po sila dun. Nagkakapit-kapit lang sila dun. So the coating of the bacterium with antibody, as I've just explained, results in the enhanced phagocytosis by the neutrophil. And that process is now referred to as opsonization. The next step of phagocytosis is ingestion. Now, this process occurs rapidly after attachment. The cell membrane of the phagocytic cell invaginates or nagkakaroon ng indentation and surrounds the attached particle, as we can see right here in this illustration. the particle is taken into the cytoplasm and enclosed within a vacuole that is called the phagosome. Okay? So dun po sa area kung saan mismo nag-attach yung bacterium, magkakaroon ng space doon sa phagocyte. And that goes deeper and deeper until it swallows the entire cell. So magsasara din po itong space na to eventually, and we will now call that as a phagosome. Okay? So the phagosome is the enclosed vacuole that has formed, and this phagosome contains the pathogenic particle that it just ate. Okay? So the phagosome would now fuse with the lysosomes. Ang lysosomes naman po, these are vacuoles containing enzymes and other bacterial components. Okay, ulitin natin, yung phagosome, ang laman niya ay yung particle ng pathogen na in-engulf ng phagocyte. Ang lysosome, ang laman niya ay yung mga enzymes na gagamitin ng phagocyte para patayin yung nasa looban ng phagosome. Okay? So eventually, these two structures will combine and it would be referred to as a phagolysosome. So literal, pinagsama lang po sila. Okay? So phagosome plus lysosome equals phagolysosome. Alright? The list of enzymes that are found within the lysosomes is quite long. Alright? There are more than 20 enzymes, proteases, lipases, RNAs and DNAs, and also peroxidase, and kasama na rin yung acid phosphatase dun sa looban ng lysosomes na yun. So most of these are important in the killing and digestion of the engulfed bacterial cell. All right. So let's proceed to the actual killing process. All right. In the actual killing process, the phagocytosis of a particle triggers a significant increase in the metabolic activity of the neutrophil or macrophage. All right. So this increase is termed as a metabolic burst or respiratory burst. Okay, ulitin po natin yon. Kapag po, nagsimula na yung phagocytosis na engulf ng isang particle or ang isang pathogenic organism, biglang aangat yung mga metabolic processes dun sa looban ng phagocytic cell nito. So again, ang tawag dun ay metabolic burst or respiratory burst. Okay? So the phagocyte will increase glycolysis, which will eventually produce or kind of like lead to the production of lactic acid and hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide produced at this time diffuses from the cytoplasm into the phagolysosome. Okay, ulitin natin, aangat yung metabolic processes ng phagocyte, magpo-produce siya ng hydrogen peroxide. Yung hydrogen peroxide, tatagas siya papunta dun sa loob ng phagolysosome. So this acts in conjunction with the other compounds to exert a bactericidal effect. Okay? So kaya siya tinawag na respiratory burst because glycolysis is what type of process? Aerobic, 'di ba? Aerobic process po ang glycolysis. All right? So, ayan po. Okay, so anyway, ayun po, no, the killing process includes having a respiratory burst which increases glycolysis, and glycolysis is an aerobic activity. Recall time? Recall time po muna tayo, no? Kaka-discuss lang natin to sa previous chapter. Ano po yung isa pang form of respiration maliban sa glycolysis? Which other form of respiration aside from glycolysis could be done by aerobic and facultative anaerobes? The correct answer to that is respiration, di ba po? So, ayan po, no? We have glycolysis and the tricarboxylic acid cycle, alright? Or otherwise referred to as the Krebs cycle. So, ulitin natin, when phagocytosis happens dun sa fourth step, which is killing, umaangat yung glycolysis. Pero ulitin natin, may isa pang form of respiration and that's referred to as the tricarboxylic acid cycle, which is more commonly known as the Krebs cycle, as we can see right here in this pop-up screenshot. That ends our discussion on Chapter 2 of Mahon's Diagnostic Microbiology, focusing on host-parasite interaction. This has been Aurel Enriquez. Thank you so much for watching.